I am going to say something before we begin all this. I have been watching the videos on the news, like I'm sure many of you have, where people are going to the beaches and they're still going to bars. I know people personally who don't want to stay indoors. And of course, by the nature of what we are talking about, there is a lot of debate whether or not you should or shouldn't drive for Uber. And I don't normally like sharing memes on this channel or in my videos. I think memes can be general oversimplifications, and this one is admittingly no different. That said, I can't help but point out that for those of us who are complaining about the quarantine period and curfews, just remember that your grandparents were called to war. You are being called to sit on the couch and watch Netflix. People, we can do this. Hey everyone, this is Kevin, the Apptrepreneur. Welcome to the channel today, and well, we've got a little bit of a sensitive topic today. I'm not going to lie. We have a little bit of a sensitive topic because we are going to be talking stimulus packages. And for those of you who are not aware of what a stimulus package is, although you probably know by now, but hey, let's just cover our bases real quick. A stimulus package is when the government gets together and they spend money, usually money they don't have, to stimulate the economy. That for whatever reason, money is borrowed, like on a mystical credit card that we're not entirely sure how we're going to pay back, and it's put into the economy in hopes of like, hey, if you get like a little bit of an infusion of cash, you might be, inspired to spend it, or maybe if you're low on cash, you can save it and you can spend it for a rainy day, whatever. Now, these stimulus packages are normally extremely unpopular by millions of Americans for a couple reasons. First of all, we always end up paying for it. It's usually in higher taxes, or the tax return next year is going to be a lot lower because we got an infusion of cash. Some people basically see it as like an advance on their next year's taxes, which is not a terrible way to look at it. And the other reason people typically don't like them is because whenever they're put into the economy, most of the time it's because of poor management on the company's parts. For example, in the last market crash, where like the housing crash and everything, that all crashed because companies were being unscrupulous, doing shady things, and they weren't doing what they should have been doing, and they got bailed out by the government. And a lot of people felt that was wrong, that hey, you know what, these companies should be forced to sweat a little bit. And they really weren't allowed to sweat for the most part. I mean, most of the companies, like for example, I believe General Motors, I don't know which one exactly, but one of these companies took a stimulus check, begged that it was important so that the company could keep going and they could pay their employees. And then when they got the stimulus money, they gave their CEOs multi-million-dollar bonuses, which, hey, you know what? Whether you're a Democrat, Republican, I don't care. That's a pretty scummy thing to do. This stimulus package is a little different. I truly believe that. And you're going to find fewer people opposing it because while you will have some people saying like, well, the government should not bail out poor money management, it's like there's no poor money management about a situation, an invisible enemy, if you will, that is preventing people from going to work or even leaving their house for the most part. And that is why a lot of companies are reaching out for a little bit of money. Now, I'm not here to get into the debate whether or not this is too early. I'm not going to get into the debate which companies deserve it, because here's the thing. Whenever a stimulus package is announced, every company out there walks up to the government and holds out their hand, and they're like, we need some money for this. And look, as much as I love the movie theaters, for example, I mean, it's kind of, unless they can prove that there's absolutely no money in the bank, I think even they will survive for a couple months, much as it would hurt. Well, obviously, we knew this was going to happen, but Uber is coming to the government and they've got their hands held out. But this is an interesting situation, because you might remember like a few days ago, Dara Khosrowshahi said that Uber has enough cash to get through the current situation in a few months. He's not going to the government asking for the company to be saved. He's going to the government asking for the workers, the drivers, you, me, or whoever's driving it at any point. He's asking for support for them. Now, I've been trying to avoid reading articles word for word for the most part. I think in this case, because of the complexity of the article, we have to do that, unfortunately. But I will sprinkle my own commentary in there, obviously. So, as travel within U.S. cities becomes increasingly limited in efforts to mitigate the spread of the new situation, the new normal, if you will, Uber CEO Dara Khosrowshahi asked President Donald Trump on Monday to provide relief to gig workers whose income has been significantly cut due to the crisis. He writes, "I respectfully and urgently request that the economic stimulus you are considering, along with any other future legislative measures in response to the current outbreak, includes protections and benefits for independent workers, not just employees," Khosrowshahi wrote in a letter. "My goal in writing to you is not to ask for a bailout for Uber," which is good because that would be pretty contradictory to the comments you had just made. "Once we move past the immediate crisis, the opportunity to legally provide them with a real safety net going forward." Now, here's what's interesting about this memo. First of all, I'm glad that he's not asking for money for Uber, which, by the way, all things considering, I think Uber, Lyft, I think those companies are definitely in the doghouse right now. If any company could probably use a bailout because their business model has completely imploded, it's them. Other companies I consider that could be in dire straits right now are like Six Flags and what was that other company? Yeah, maybe the movie theaters. Sure, why not? The movie theaters. So it's commendable that he's at least asking for the driver's benefit. But there's a catch to this, as there always is a catch with Uber and pretty much any CEO of a large corporation asking for something on behalf of their workers. I'm sorry to say, companies who care for their workers are few and far between. I'm learning that. Well, I learned that a long time ago, but I mean, I'm seeing it personally in full view with some other people I'm working with right now. As it points out in this article, Uber has spent much of its history fighting calls for drivers on its platform to be reclassified as employers rather than independent contractors because, now it would incur a lot of expenses. However, rather than give into attempts to reclassify workers, I don't know why that, it's like Uber is turning to the government to plead for help on their behalf. Because Uber doesn't want to take care of the drivers, the how many hundreds of thousands they have right now. They want the government to. And that's actually kind of an interesting thing about government bailouts or government assistance in general. And look, and this is why I'm not going to get into that right now, but this is why it's easy for people who are voting, to say, well, the government should take care of them or the company should take care of them, because you know what? We're not at the company, we're at the government. We just see that we can't help, so someone else should help. And it's a classic case of passing the buck, and in some cases, we probably even know what, it would cost. If you're running a company right now, like a small business, you know what it's going to cost you to take care of your employees for a couple of months. Maybe you don't want to do that, maybe you can't do that, so you're going to look to the government for it. So anyway, they do go over a little bit on, the statute of the employees' laws changing and creating a third category. And this is actually where you find out what the real purpose of this letter is, because Khosrowshahi wrote to Trump, and he actually brought up that reclassifying drivers would cause a challenge. So this is what he said. Reclassifying these gig workers as employees could result in the provision of more social protections, but the reality of employment means it would eliminate a key value proposition of this type of work. Instead of true flexibility, where workers need not report at a certain time or place, can start or stop working at the tap of a button, and can work on multiple platforms simultaneously, driving or delivering would come to resemble the kind of shift-based work that many people cannot fit into their lives. And then he goes on to ask the Trump administration and Congress to consider updating labor laws to provide a third way to classify workers to, quote, remove the forced choice between flexibility and protection for millions of American workers. So that's what this is ultimately all about. Ultimately, Khosrowshahi wants to use this opportunity as a way to reclassify the gig workers in a third category. And he's doing it under the guise that, hey, I am writing to you, humbly asking, begging really, take care of our drivers. We're not asking for bailout money. We'll be fine. However, the drivers are suffering and they need to be taken care of. It's rather dastardly, if you will. Now, here's the thing. I have spoken about the quote-unquote third classification, if you will, for over a year now. In principle, I'm not opposed to having a third classification for drivers. That said, I don't believe for a second Uber and Lyft should be the instigators on this, nor should they be the leaders of this conversation, because their third way is going to be a way that, benefits them. In fact, if anything, I would think that if they made a third classification, based on the fact that they keep losing all of the tests for independent contractor, they would want the third way to look very much like independent contractor, but with more restrictions. So, for example, the independent contractor status right now says you have to let them choose their own rates, they have to know the information they're doing. Basically, Uber's third classification would be, okay, they can get on, but, they don't see the rates, they don't see where they're going, they don't have a say. That's their thing. I would not be I don't trust Uber to be part of this conversation. I really don't. And that the fact that Uber and Lyft has for a long time been pushing for the third classification, they know what they're doing is not true independence. I think most of my viewers, even those who say they prefer to be an independent contractor, I think they know they're not really independent either. However, Uber and Lyft know that the gig is up, no pun intended, and they, want to be part of they want to continue to shape the conversation as best as they can. Now, here's the thing. Khosrowshahi also spoke with Senate Minority Leader Schumer, that's Chuck Schumer, and other members of Congress from both parties over the weekend, according to Uber. The company said he is also reaching out to House Speaker Pelosi and Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. Representative Schumer did not immediately respond to requests for comment, and a White House spokesperson said, as President Trump has said, we are going to ensure that we take care of all Americans, including affected industries and small businesses, and that we emerge from this challenge stronger and with a prosperous, and growing economy. Now, you might notice in that statement, independent contractors are not mentioned, and that's why Khosrowshahi is writing the letter in such a public way. Because here's the thing. This is probably where we've been talking smack about Khosrowshahi for a while, and let's be frank for a little bit. I don't think he's a very good CEO for the drivers, but he's an excellent CEO for a company. He's the company's not profitable, and that's not completely his fault. He's got a crummy business model, and he was dealt like a company that was doing things that he can't just change at the snap of a finger. If he could raise the prices on all the rides and make Uber profitable, he would, but he can't. Now, I'm not excusing him at all, because he does not care about the drivers at all. He only cares about Uber as a company. And this is where he's going to truly try to prove his worth to Uber as a company. This is his chance to show that he can get something done. Because, hey, what has been bugging Uber this whole time? That darn independent contractor classification thing. Well, guess what? We are in a crisis now. And the thing about being in crisis is that people are willing to give up a few freedoms that they normally would not otherwise give up. So that means, and there's bailout money, and there's a lot of reform. Heck, the military is being called in to help with certain situations. It's just the way it is. Now, with that said, what perfect timing for Khosrowshahi to go to Trump and Schumer and Pelosi and McConnell, all of them. He's going to Democrats and Republicans. He don't care. And saying, hey, this is a problem. Don't you see what a disaster this was for hundreds of thousands of workers who do not fall under a employee contract? They are getting screwed. So please, I have some ideas for you on how we can protect them, and they will probably listen to him and take it seriously now more than ever. So this is a kind of a Hail Mary pass, if you will. This is Khosrowshahi basically going to the government, knowing they're in disarray, knowing that they're willing to listen to anything right now, and saying, hey, we need to do something about this, and I've got some ideas. Never mind that most of the drivers probably will not approve. The very people this will affect will not have a say in this third classification. But hey, now's the time for him to try to get it passed. Now's the time to try to get it passed. Now, granted, I will mention, because again, I think we're all human and we all want to be together. And plus, this is going to segue nicely into my next video later today, which is about Lyft, actually. That Uber has already taken some steps to help its workers impacted by the crisis, as Khosrowshahi outlined in his letter. Uber agreed to offer workers on its platform 14 days of financial assistance if they are diagnosed with the Voldemort of diseases or told to go into quarantine by a public health authority. Now then, how are the companies actually holding up their end of the bargain on that one? Well, tune in a little later for a video later on. We will actually talk about that in detail. In the meantime, what do you think about Khosrowshahi's appeal for not only stimulus money on behalf of the drivers, but for actually getting the third classification hammered out, maybe even without voters' help? Because, I mean, he didn't say without voters' help, but, you know, this is kind of a backdoor thing. Let's be honest. I would love to know what all of you think about it, so you know the drill. Comment below, like, favorite, share, subscribe, and as always, flame responsibly. Have a good one.